Hello and welcome to the Entrepreneur and You. I'm your host, Mike Kasin, and we're here today with Suzie Borders, who is the CEO and co-founder of BadVR. Thank you, Suzie, for being here today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here with you.
Excellent. So let's delve right into it. Tell me a little bit about your background. How did you decide to start a business?
Yeah, so my background is in psychology. I studied that when I went to school. And then afterwards, I went into the UX, user experience and product design. So I've been doing that for the past 8 or so years. And during that process, I worked at a lot of startups and I had a lot of options to go work at larger companies like Google or Disney, but I decided to turn those job offers down to go work at smaller businesses and startups because I had always wanted to be an entrepreneur and to own my own business. So I thought the best way to sort of achieve that dream would be to be around people who were doing that so I could learn from them, learn from that experience and get firsthand knowledge of what it took to really be an entrepreneur. When I went to school, entrepreneurship programs weren't really a thing, at least not in my area. So I just decided to go with what my parents, so my mother and father come from a medical background. So I did the sort of least technically medical thing, got that out of the way, and then started my career towards being an entrepreneur myself.
That must have been really hard to have turned down security with like Disney or Google for something that is kind of an unknown. How'd you get into that mindset?
That's something that my mom asks me about every day. I don't think she will ever understand it. And it's actually quite funny that you asked that question because for me, the easier thing was to say no to Disney and to Google, just simply because I'm the sort of person, I love novelty, I love excitement, I love challenges. And not to say that working at those companies might not entail some part of that, but for me, it was, my dream always to be an entrepreneur. And like I said, I wanted to be around that and I wanted to put myself in situations that would challenge me the most. And I don't like the bureaucracy and structure that tends to come along with larger organizations. And I always wanted to stay nimble. So it was just a no-brainer for me to just go towards smaller businesses and startups and to surround myself with entrepreneurs.
So tell me a little bit about how BadVR started.
Yeah, so throughout my career, I've been designing interfaces for data visualization products. And for a long time, that was 2D data visualization products, specifically at companies called Remind and Crexi. And so I was working with really large nationwide geospatial data sets and trying to build interfaces for normal non-technical users to get insight and knowledge from these residential or commercial real estate geospatial data sets. And that process of making data accessible and understandable to normal quote unquote users, because we're building interfaces for real estate agents and they don't tend to be data scientists. So it was really this process of idea of making data universally accessible by making the interfaces with which we work with this data easy to operate without a technical background. There were a lot of challenges inherent in that. Making data sets understandable and usable, especially really large data sets, is not easy. And so during all of my time at these companies and all of the challenges that I ran into, it really inspired me to find a creative solution. And one day I thought, these geospatial data sets are inherently multidimensional, right? Because the geospatial environment that we live in is multidimensional. So instead of having to sort of slice it down and look at these in 2-dimensional slices or parts, what if we actually look at the multidimensional data set multidimensionally? So I was inspired to really check that out, to bring together this data visualization and data analytics with AR and VR, which had just sort of become a new technology or sort of reemerged as a new technology. But all of it was inspired working with data sets, designing 2-dimensional data visualization and analytics tools, running into all of the challenges there and finding a novel, interesting new way to meet those challenges.
It sounds to me like you had to be really patient for the technology to catch up with your concept.
Yes, yeah, well, specifically the hardware, the headsets, the VR or AR headsets, because the idea for BadVR is really to democratize access to data and democratize understanding of data.
I remember when Jad showed me the headset and test case, it was really neat because I was able to actually manipulate the data in certain ways while I'm wearing the headset. And so you could see, oh yeah, this is where people are moving. This is like, it made data much more accessible. And that was what I thought was super cool about your product and what you're doing.
Yeah, we wanted to make, I mean, like I said, our goal really is to democratize access to data, make it so that everybody can both see the data, understand the data, work with the data, manipulate the data, filter the data. And from my experience and all of, the startups that I've worked at before, data has always sort of hit a bottleneck. So there would be a lot of incoming data sets, but it would all come down to a team of data analysts or data scientists that would have to pull the data, analyze it, and then share it with whatever team had asked for it. Or at least in my experience, the data scientists, the data analysts were always overloaded, right? And it was always like 2 or 3 week process to wait for them to pull the data, analyze it, and share it with whatever team needed it. So my vision for a future is one in which everybody, instead of having to go through a particular team of highly trained people, everyone themselves can just put on a headset, access the data that they need, and then perform the analysis intuitively, like you mentioned, to get the answers that they're looking for. So, not needing to know how to code in any particular language, just being able to put on a headset, to manipulate the data using your hands or using a simple controller to really understand what's going on and to get the answers to the questions that you need.
So let's switch gears a little, and I'd like to talk to you about your role as CEO and what that means. So what are your daily responsibilities as a CEO of a growing company?
Basically, as a CEO, ultimately the buck stops with me. I'm responsible for everything that happens within the organization. It's a lot of figuring out long-term strategy. What are the next steps for the business? Planning that out from a financial point of view, planning that out from an operational point of view, determining what are the next steps that we are taking over the next 6 months, over the next 12 months. Also focusing a lot on hiring and recruiting really good individuals, defining company culture, and then communicating that to the public to try to find like-minded people and talented individuals. And then of course, a lot of meetings, just transfer of information, a lot of long-term and short-term decision making, making sure that everybody's doing their job, completing their work, checking in on people. Just a lot of management and long-term strategy, I guess, would be my final answer.
I know you're in a predominantly male industry. Technology in general is a male industry, and you are a female CEO in a predominantly male industry. Do you want to speak to that a little bit? What it's like being a female CEO? Any challenges that you may have had?
Yeah, I mean, it is funny to me in many ways. People often support female CEOs and they say they want to see more female CEOs. I find that to be true in a lot of what would be considered traditionally feminine areas. It's more difficult being the CEO of a company that doesn't do something that would be considered traditionally feminine. I found that to be true. People hear that I'm a CEO and they think that it's a CEO of a fashion company or some childcare company or something that would traditionally be more feminine. And when they find out that it's an immersive data visualization company, it tends to be a little like unexpected and not quite as easily understood. Earlier in my career, it was a little bit more difficult. I found myself being oftentimes, especially at smaller startups, the only woman in the room. And there were a lot of instances where I felt like I was like a houseplant, where I was there because people thought I looked nice and it was like good to have a woman there, but nobody really wanted me to like engage or say anything. There were plenty of men that supported me, don't get me wrong, but it definitely ran into a lot of those like good old boy types that definitely didn't want a woman to speak up or have an opinion. So unfortunately, I internalized that as a younger woman, and I assumed that because they didn't want to hear what I had to say, that the world didn't care or want to hear what I had to say. And I suffered under that bad and inaccurate understanding for a long time. It took me until my late 20s to really understand, like, look, regardless of whether or not the people around you express an interest in what you have to say, the world definitely does want to hear what you have to say, and what you have to say is valued. So the only way forward is to really just speak your truth. But it took a while. And to, not have role models that look like me, that was really difficult because everyone who was doing something in this world that I wanted to do was a dude. So also finding female role models and people that lived my dreams, who looked like me, who were the same gender as me, that was really helpful in helping me understand that this was a possible thing for me to do.
Do you have words of wisdom that you would want to impart?
Yeah, I would just say, like, be ready to like exist in this world and understand that there are going to be people that don't like you or don't believe in you or don't support what you're doing, and don't let that stop you. So just be comfortable with the fact that not everyone's going to like you and not everyone's going to believe in you, and learn to not let that affect you. Learn to let it roll off your back, and if anything, turn it into positive motivation and the drive to prove them wrong. Also, seek out mentors, people who have gone through what you wish to go through and who have accomplished what you wish to accomplish. Surround yourself with people like that who can help guide you. Surround yourself with people who believe in you and really help you achieve your dreams. That would be my best advice.
That's great advice. Great advice. Let's talk a little bit about branding. You guys are great at branding your products and trademarking your names and your logos. You want to talk a little bit about how important branding is for you and your company?
Yeah. So my company's name, as mentioned, is BadVR. It's very interesting, the approach that we've taken to naming the business. So a lot of people either really love it, the name, or they really hate it. It's like, well, I don't understand. Why would you want to call your product bad? But people who get it, they're like, oh yeah, that's really cool. Like, it's like badass.
Yeah.
It's actually an acronym that stands for Bring All Your Data to VR, because it's not a name like VR Analytics, which a lot of other companies that are in a similar space or other enterprise focused companies would name themselves something a little bit less dramatic or edgy. Because of this approach that we've taken by having this edgy name, it's made us very memorable. It's made us stand out in a space with a lot of other players. It's differentiated us in many ways. So this branding of us being edgy and sort of unique and cool in a traditionally dry and sort of stuffy space has been a really, really great strategy. It's made us stand out. It's made us really memorable. It's gotten us attention in ways that I think a less edgy name wouldn't have. It's that sort of general strategy of taking a risk, because once you take that risk, sure, you'll polarize the audience. You will have detractors, but on the flip side of that coin, the people who are supporters very much do support you. Whereas if you don't take that risk and you just sort of go down the middle of the road, you'll just be forgotten. You won't stand out in the crowd.
That's great advice. Speaking of advice, what is the best career advice you've ever received?
The best career advice I've ever received is that you don't become something until you decide to do that thing. So for instance, for a long period of time, I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wanted to be a founder. I wanted to be a CEO, but I felt like I didn't have the right background or the right credentials. And I remember a CEO from a company that I worked at previously sat me down and he was like, look, until you believe and decide that you're a CEO, you'll never be one. There's no credentials. There's no like test that you have to take to get some credential that says you're a CEO. You are a CEO when you decide to be one. So when you're ready and you decide that you're going to do it, that's when you'll become one. So stop waiting for someone else to validate that, or stop waiting to get the right education or to learn this skill set. He's like, just do it. And when you do it, that's when you will become it. And I think that that's true in so many ways, especially women, I feel like always feel underqualified or always feel like they're not enough. And it's really just about assuming the title, and by assuming the title and just being what you wish to be, you become that in this weird way. It's like a self-fulfilling cycle. Like, stop waiting for the world's permission, stop waiting for your own permission, stop waiting for more whatever, just go and do it. And in the act of doing it, that's when you become it. So that would be the best advice I was ever given. And hopefully that advice helps someone else as well.
That's great, Suzie. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. We really appreciate it. And thank you guys for tuning in to The Entrepreneur in You. We'll see you next time.